Ayin Beis, Volume 1. We're up to Discourse 28. Vayishlach, Yaakov, page Reish Ches, 208, chapter Kuf Ches, 108. Okay, so the Frierdiker Rebbe gives a summary of the beginning of each discourse. What does he say in Vayishlach? Dalad Rapsi de Echad. Okay, the large dalad of the word Echad, in Shema. And the last chapter was Yaakov Asamatseva V'lo Gal. Okay. So, as I discussed in the last class, in a long summary, what he's doing here now is explaining the whole context of the role of sefirot through the story of Yaakov, first with Laban and then Yaakov with Esav. So briefly, here's how he explains it. Now, you look in Chumash and Pasha Vayetze, this week's Pasha actually, you see stones play a very prominent role. Everywhere there's a stone. There's first the stones he takes and puts under his head. The stones are quarrel, they turn into one. Then he takes from that stone and he turns it into... I saw, by the way, Aryeh Kaplan translates Matseva pillar. Yeah, I translated marker. More fitting, I think, marker, based on what it says here, because I'm a kuda. But he translates Matseva. Anyway, he takes the stone, makes a Matseva, and then pours oil on it, anoints it, and says, Yeh lebeis Elokim.
It's interesting that this week he talks about the stones, protection for the head. People are finding shelter for their heads.
Yeah. Then he goes on, and the stone, of course, the stone that covers the well, that only Yaakov could lift. It's nice with stones. Then, at the end of the Pasha, when he makes his covenant with Lovan, Yaakov, so it's again with stones. And it's very similar. He takes the stone and makes a matzeva. Then he tells the Echov, he tells the family, he tells his Lovan to take, they should gather stones, and they make a gal. A gal is what we call a mound. And this becomes Eda Galazeh, the Eda Matzeva. And here the discussion is what's the difference between Matzeva and Gal, which we didn't yet get into. He asked the question, why he made a Matzeva. The Bechaya says he wanted Lovan also to make a Matzeva as a marker, but Lovan instead made a Gal, more of a mound. A Matzeva clearly is one stone that you would use as a marker. Okay. So, how do you explain the thing with the stones? So I realized once I started learning it, Evan Sapir, he's in the middle of explaining, sefirot have three meanings. One is the meaning that comes from the word number, misper. One is the meaning of sefirot from the word story, sipur. And the third interpretation, which we began here, is Evan Sapir, a shining, a brilliant stone, a stone that illuminates. Stones, as he said, is atzilus, or kelim. What it simply means is that we're dealing here with the interface between the divine and existence. The question is, how do you bring together finite and infinite? How do you bring together something that is so divine and something so mundane? So the way God created existence, this is the reason we have a whole seder shtalshlus, and namely the sefirot. This is the main theme of Ayin Beis, is how do you bring these two worlds together? They're opposites. The answer is there's continuous interfaces that God planted into existence. So we have interfaces, which is like a meturgeman, like a translator. An interface has to have a part from this side, a part from that side, like a mediator. So a mediator speaks both languages. So you have everything in Seder Shtalshlus has an element of existence in it, of structure, and has an element of elokus, of divine. The sefirot play a central role because the sefirot, as he said, all giluyim come through sefirot, all the way from the highest levels before the tzimtzum. Even sefirot ain't ketz, when there's no number to them, there's still a sefirah. So what does the word sefirah mean? So essentially, sefirah plays this. It has three meanings, really three dimensions. So number one is sefirah indicates a number. What's number? Number is in one word essentially how we measure existence. Everything in this material world is measured by numbers, whether it's quantity, whether it's volume, whether it's size, height, weight, width. Everything is by number. That's how we define something. Someone says, describe to me something. You describe it with a number. That's the first. Now, we know it's an external description. You tell someone is 6 feet tall and they weigh 150 pounds. Actually, that means he's in good shape. You're not saying much about the person. All you're saying is a description, but that's how we define things. Look at your license. What do they ask? They don't ask for your personality. They ask you about your numbers, basically. But so as he explained in Chassidus, within the number, however, lies a deeper story. So we say 10. For example, the number 10. We know that 10 has really 10 energies in it, and 10 quality. Then comes the second story, the deeper story. That a sefirot tells the story. It tells the story of Gvul and tells the story of God, the source, as we discussed at length. And then comes where we're up to now is Even Sapir. That sefirot are meant to be transparent channels. I just want to explain it with an example just to make it a little palatable. We spoke about it, but I just want to spell it out. If you look at your life, each of us looks at our lives, what you do right now, this morning, what you're going to do later today. So really, there's two things going on in everything we do. There's what we do, and what its purpose is. Most of us are involved most of the time with survival. What do I mean by that? You sleep a third of your life. A third of the day you sleep. If you sleep 8 hours, that's exactly a third. If you sleep a little less, it's a little less than a third. But it's a big... We eat, we shop, we do all the other things that are means to this. So basically what we're involved with, if you want to use the B'lashon Chassidus, is not just containers, kelim, with the outer dimension of containers. So, what was the purpose of existence? Why did God give us life? Why do you have a body? Why do you wake up in the morning? To make a dir b'tachtein. You're sent on a mission, your neshama was sent here, to change the world, to bring godliness into the world, transform your corner of the world, make it a more sacred, a more refined, a more sensitive place. And we all know that takes Aveda. That's not natural. When you wake up, you think about your own interests first. Even if you're a good person, you may help somebody. But primarily, most of your preoccupation is what we call the world of Yesh. This doesn't mean it's bad. It's the way God created existence. We just want to point out how little eris we really have going on. When you do something that is a little more focused on the purpose, you're then focusing on the neshama. So in other words, how much of what we do is in the neshama's interests and how much is the body's interests? You know, if you had to make a list of the things you did today or yesterday, how many things would you say are body related and how many are soul related? I'm not even talking about evil or the half halavai. I would say 99 to 1. It's materialistic. 100%. Time-wise, maybe your kavanah is the higher one. But okay, I admire admire that. That's pretty nice. That's a bein zever zeshaved.
But you wouldn't even be able to do the other things. For example, to eat and sleep. That's all. If you don't do that, you can't do even that one mitzvah.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about. Of course you can, but that's where you stop. The question is what listen, the nature of the beast is that when you have pain, you feel your pain. You don't feel my pain. You feel yourself. That's very close up. Taniva Afsi Eid. Okay. Now, I'm not trying to paint a negative. This is the way God created. He created a tzimtzum addition. He concealed His presence, and searching for God and living a life that is godly is not an easy thing. Let's take the other extreme. A rebbe, a tzaddik, a merkava. The others are a merkava. What means a merkava? Let's speak a moment. So he says in Tanya, a merkava means 24/7. He's literally a chariot. He is a vehicle for something else, not himself. There's no self-interest. That means everything, his eating, his sleeping, his walking, everything he does is basically aligned. This is called transparent keli. This would be like a neshama of atzilus. Kelim of atzilus, all they're doing is revealing the eir of Elokus. How it translates in human terms, the body and the evodim and all the physical containers and asius of this person, keches and levushim, are all aligned to the eris, which in turn are aligned to what God wants.
Is this something that we can achieve?
Tanya says no, because only a tzaddik. I mean, the ziyara of if you do Yaveda, God could send in a neshama of a tzaddik. But that's not what's expected of us. What's expected of us is that we should control our levushim. Huh? If you do Yaveda, not guaranteed. He says he could. Yeah. We are expected to control our thought, speech, and action. To say that we're aligned 24/7 with what's Tzadot and Elyon, Bisman Hazeh, is not expected from anybody. No. But you have to know there's a standard like that. There are people like that. It's just to give an example how far we are from it. It's not to knock us. It's just to show how deep the helomness of the stadim are, that kelim are not aligned with their edus. To put it in simpler English, I say this always to people who don't even know what Ayin Beis is. How aligned, if someone asks you, who are you? Most people give you their business card. Right? That's not who you are, that's what you do. Who are you? It's a very difficult question to answer who I am. Do you know who you are? Are you a product of your parents? Are you a product of your community? I'm a Lubavitcher. I'm an Orthodox Jew. Are you a human being? Are you a Homo sapien? I mean, what does it mean, who you are? Who are you? So who are you is a very difficult question to answer. Who are you? Really, we probably don't know much who we are. Who we are is how God envisioned our soul to be. Well, you could say, I know what I'm good at. I know what I do. I know what I'm involved in. So how much aligned is what we do with who we are? That would be a question, how your kelim are aligned. I'm applying this into some simple psychological, practical terms. How aligned are your kelim to your edus? That's the question. This is not about criticize. This is about knowing the problem is half the cure. You have to know the situation. Most of us are mostly not aligned with our soul's interests. Most people who work will tell you that they don't even like their job. Some will say, I learned to like my job. Some will say, I never wanted to do this. I ended up doing this because I needed parnas. But people live very much with a big dichotomy, a split between who they are and what they do. This is an example of a split between kelim and edus. Now, what the Tanya says, what's expected of us is we will have two voices. The Nefesh Abamis is interested in kelim. The kelim of obviously of kelipah. What means kelim of kelipah? Means its own self-interest. Every time you have a battle, the two choices you have to make. Am I going to take care of myself right now? Or am I going to help somebody else? That's a battle. That battle is the way it was meant to be. What's expected of us is to win the battle by saying, you know what? I have that voice inside of me, but my thought, speech, and action is not going to be controlled by that voice. I remember when I was in yeshiva, we had Rabbi Opkovsky was our mashgiach in Ocean Parkway. Anyway, one day there was this guy used to come always 11 o'clock. He used to say this starts 9, he would come 11. So Rabbi Sol, tried first punishing, then they tried with goodness. He said to him, look, if you learn Tanya, it says you have two voices. You have them every morning. When you wake up, it says, you wake up, let's say 7 o'clock, your alarm goes off. So your Nefesh Al-Kas is telling you get out of bed and go. Your Nefesh Al-Bamis is telling you sleep a little more. So say to yourself, you have this battle, and just tell your Nefesh Al-Bamis that right now you got to go. If you can do that, okay, it seems like a good advice. Anyway, so the Bacher, so it helped for 3 days, that he would go. He came, started coming 9 o'clock. Then one morning, back to 11 o'clock again. So Bishol calls, what happened? He says, exactly what you said happened. Nefesh Al-Kiz said I should go to yeshiva. Nefesh Abamis said sleep a little more. And it took me 2 hours to win. The Nefesh Al-Kiz took 2 hours for the Nefesh Al-Kiz to win. Anyway, the point I'm making here is, we are so accustomed to our lives. If you want to learn Chassidus properly, the first thing you have to be ready to say is honesty. He said 50-50. I'm not going to challenge him. You challenge yourself. It's ridiculous what you're saying, 50-50.
You don't have to include the night also.
Include everything. Include just the days you're hours awake. 50-50, 50 Nefesh Al-Kiz, 50 Nefesh Abamis. Halavai. How do you know what they have? The Machshava Zoros, obviously.
They're learning most of the day.
Okay, you're talking Chitzenius, or are you talking about here we have some specimens. Here's a Bacher. 50-50. He means in his days the Bacher. Listen, we're not here for a confessional. This is not the point. It's not group therapy. Let me just say this. I call that person the Mumma person. I'm speaking about myself. No way, 50-50. But, I'll tell you what happens. When I get my ego involved in my work, and my work happens to be good work, like right now, we're learning this. This seems to be, right, the Nefesh Al-Kiz. I would say the Nefesh Abam is the Nefesh. At least for me. I enjoy this. If my Nefesh Abam didn't enjoy this, I don't know if I'd be so much involved. To be honest. That's my honest approach. Fine. But by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. It says, number one. Number two, the Rebbe said, Tzibel is often the Veren. Our job is, no one said you have to destroy your ego. Adrab. Better use your ego for kedusha purpose than not use the ego. Use the ego for the opposite. An ego is always going to be there, so you might as well harness it. Now, my point that I'm trying to make here is I'm just trying to give an example of kelim and eris in our lives. So kelim are the things we're involved in. Now, in Elam Hazeh, there's a big distortion. You go to atzilus, kelim don't have another agenda. There's no such thing as doing something else. In atzilus, it's natural that every keli is aligned with its eir. Keli chesed is eira chesed. And there's no other agenda. In Bria, you would say it's starting to have a little other agenda. You know, it's Rubei Tev and Midra. In Yitzira, it becomes 50-50. In Yitzira, it's Rubei self, Yesh, and Miyut for God. And Nasiya Gashmi and Chumri. Look what he says in Tanya Perek Lamed Vav. He said, "Dir betachtenim begilei lekus behelam acher helam ache yard lamata helam behest moli klippus ziter achre ache menagdim lerotzen seinis barach, right? Ve'emrim and even afsied." That's how dark it gets. There's a sikha from the Rebbe, Miketz, I think, in Mamzayin, where the Rebbe actually enumerates how each level, is negay. In Pasha and Tanya, mamish see darker. But when you look at this, you can realize, you see, we're here, we're born in this world. All you see is kelim, you don't see much eris. You start deducing, you know what, if there's a world, ein dover eis atzmi, so I wants to put it here. You start learning Torah reveals to you there's a higher reality. But we live in an agnostic universe. God created a universe where you can easily deny God anytime. Which means the kelim are not aware of their eris. That's the bottom line. Now throw into the picture levushim, which is what we're discussing, then it really gets more complicated. Because levushim, a keli in atzilus, the question is how does it get so concealed? Because at the end of the day, containers like faculties, let's put it this way, if atzilus is like divine faculties, as we said, are revealers. They're not concealers. Your faculties don't tell the whole story of your soul, but they definitely reveal. When you're thinking, when you're using your mind or your heart, it's an expression of revelation. So that's why comes the next step is levushim, which is called parsois in Kabbalah. A parsa is the gal. So the story of Yaakov and Esav is really the story of bringing a lakus into a world where it's concealed. Yaakov is the one that is atzilus, calls it balatikun. He's the one that works with the sheep. Sheep is yitzia, from the word yitzia tzayin, that brings out these eris into kelim. That's Yaakov's aved, kelim of atzilus. Lovan, as he explained, there's two interpretations in Lovan. Lovan of Kedusha, in the source, and that's Levana Elyon. So Yaakov is working with Levana, he's bimamshich, he's drawing down from the source that's higher than Kelim. That's higher than all these levels. That's like he says, keser of atzilus, higher than atzilus. Draws it down into akudim, nekudim, vrudim. That's biyah, b'ri yitzir asiyah, klolim. And then this is second. And the gal there, what's the gal? The role of the gal there is to conceal the bleak gvul of the energy, but it still remains divine. So he gives the example of what's a gal. A gal is stones. You make a pile of stones. Stones are letters, but they're bundled. But when you make a pile of them, they're not organized. When you speak an organized discussion, it's an organized flow. That would be like if you lined up the stones in order. But you make a pile of them, they're just disorganized. That is like that's like an example of a riddle, a chida, or what you put in the kameh, where you conceal the idea. I just saw in the Mitler Rebbe, he says that also when you pile up stones, it doesn't let light through. But a little can break through. That's Yaakov. So what does Laban do? He builds a gal. First, Laban the Kedusha. What's the gal's role? The gal's role is like bringing a mushal, because the energy is too intense to manifest in existence. You need to have this gal. You need to have a mound, and you have like a boundary, and it should go, and therefore it conceals. But it's still of the same lakus. This is a kelim of atzilus. Then he says there's lovan of kelipah. That's lovan that's lower than Yaakov. And here the gal, lovan is the opposite. Lovan builds a gal. He doesn't want to have a lakus because he doesn't want to have bittul. So he wants to be on his own. That would be where this world, Elam Hazeh, to use the example I gave before, is not interested in eris. When you speak to someone, you say, "I'm not interested. My life is good. What do you want from me?" Or when you say that to yourself, as I said, we live in a world that's dominated by kelim and by levushim. So you focus on that. You focus on external, superficial things, and you don't want to have the eir. You don't want to have the bittul. That is the gal of Laban, the negative. And this is where the end of the story is, that Yaakov, the Yaakov took a stone. He said the stone is malchus. and he made a matzeva from it. He made it into a patzif. He reveals in it a lakus, and then the Beis Elikim, he makes it a keli to be a Beis Elikim. That's what how he ended last Maimer. A Beis Elikim is that it's a revelation even higher than his source. It's basically like a taste of what happened by Matan Torah, and a taste of what will be when Mashiach comes, where there'll be complete revelation of this world, where the kelim and the eris will be completely aligned. So essentially, basically, if you want to apply it to our lives, it's very basic. We have this struggle all the time. How much of your kelim are aligned with your eris? Or you want to put it in different areas, how much of what you do is aligned with the kavanah, or the Rebbe's ratzon, or the shlichus of your life. That's what it comes down to. I would say like this. Most people, are primarily, there's an element of shituv going on, whatever, compartmentalization we call it. Most of your life is you take care of your needs, and from time to time you do something for a higher cause. So you could say, okay, what about a shliach? A shliach who dedicates his 24/7, his whole life is being a shliach. Well, even a shliach, his dedication, but the bottom line is everyone gets used to what they do, and you could also become mitzvah sanashim alamad. So everybody's dealing with elam hazeh. Nobody's not challenged by that. And the goal is obviously so there's lovan of Kedusha is the containers that conceal in order to reveal, in order to bring existence into place, and we should not be annihilated. And lovan of kelipah is the one that wants to conceal. There should be no bittul. In other words, there should be the darkness should prevail. That we should remain selfish in our world. That's essentially what he said till here. And now we'll learn Vayishlach. We'll say that after Yaakov did this Aveda with Laban, now he comes to this Parsha Vayishlach to Esav, he's ready to tell Esav, now I'm ready for you. That's the next step of the birur.
Did you mention that Yaakov was the light that shines through the gal?
Yeah, Lashni Yibaka. Yaakov Yibaka. Pierces. But it's a pierce. It's not easy. It has to pierce through because it's very dark. Essentially it goes like this. Look, Eid Ein Sof, obviously everything is aligned there. There's no kelim, nothing. It's all in it. It's achdus. Then God creates a universe, an independent entity. The Tzimtzum Harishon is the key, obviously, because it conceals the whole energy. But even after it conceals and the Kav comes, which is, think of it like a ray of light, like a teacher starting to slowly teach, it's still an enormous and very intense power. So it needs continuous concealments. And as it gets concealed, as the power of the energy, let's put it this way, the power of the divine kavanah gets concealed, which is the light, the containers emerge. And the containers have to emerge because that's the kavanah. So the concealment has a good intention at that point. But then also has a side effect. Too much concealment creates, you're too independent, which is what happens in this world. Or you want to go shevirat kelim, and I'm not going to go through all the stages. And our job is to realign it and climb back the ladder and connect the kelim all the way to the air, level by level by level by level. So basically, Laban and Yaakov plays two roles. One is how the air is going into the kelim through a gal of kedusha, so to speak, and then there's how the gal resists returning. It doesn't want to. It's happy with its life. It's not interested in bittul. That's the gist of it. Yaakov, of course, is the force that creates gili. That's how he explains basically the whole story with the stones and Parsha Vayetze, this week's Parsha.
So that means that if we were Yaakov, so to say, then in relationship to Laban of kelipah, we're doing the same thing.
Exactly right. Yep. Exactly right. Well, let's put it this way. We have a Laban within us, you could say, and a Yaakov within us. Laban within us is interested, is not interested. It's like when you say, you know what, right now I have to take care of myself, and for Nefesh Elokis, we'll deal with, Shabbos comes or something like that. And yes, there's a battle going on. But we have the power of Yaakov to deal with it. That's the key. Like he said, that the Yaakov, In other words, I want to just add one more thing, because this parenthesis bothered me, was this. That even though the structure of existence does have a seder, where, for example, when you have to convey an idea, you need to be malbashit, you have to enclose it in examples and even riddles to conceal, but there's still revelations in existence that are from higher than the parsa, from a place that's beyond the parsa. That's actually when we in the Maimorim that this is sourced in, they talk about neshamas that come from a higher level that were not affected by the parsa. By the way, another word for parsa I think is cloak. Cloak is a very good word, because they cloak and and shroud the energy. So there are neshamas. So basically, Yaakov was really bringing curtain. Yeah, but they're all curtain. I mean, technically, a parsha is a curtain, a parechus, a curtain, a veil.
Not fully encloses.
Right. No, but you could have.
It's usually like straight.
Yeah, but a curtain could be. There's different levels of curtains. There's a complete transparent. There's translucent, as we spoke, and there's opaque, where it covers almost everything. You have different levels, which are all part of the process. But there are, what he said, remember the parentheses where he says that Yaakov really brings from Eir Atzmi, that's even higher. That's a key thing here, because if you could say the questions like this: if lovan is the parsa, the negative, lovan of kelipah, and Yaakov is the Eir, why does the Eir dominate here? The answer is because Yaakov is bringing an Eir that's higher than where the parsa comes from. So therefore it has the power to pierce it. But nevertheless, this is the story that's going on. Okay. Yeah. It's a lot of summary here, because if you look in the sources, it's amazing. This is all from the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe. Okay. So let's start Vayishlach, Reish Ches. Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim Lefanav El Esav Achov. Yaakov sent Malachim before him to his brother Esav. Kreish Semrun, and this is what you should say to Esav. What should you say? Im lovan garti. V'icher adata. V'icher adata. Yaakov tells the malachim, whether it's angels or meshluchim or messengers, that tell my brother Esav that I lived with Garti and I delayed until now. It means for 20 years he was away. The tzarech lahavin, that we have to understand. What was he notifying him? Hasipur shahayim lovan. Why was he notifying him the story that happened with him, his whole narrative with Esav, with Laban rather? Why is that important? Why is that negeya? Why is that of interest or relevant to Esav? What does he care? V'Rashi Pirish, Rashi explains, in Lovan Garti Tayag Mitzvah Shamarti. That Garti is the word Tayag. That he's telling Esav, I lived with Lavan, and I kept the Tayag mitzvahs, even though it was with Lavan, I kept them. So Garti means I lived and kept the mitzvahs. V'Gam Zeina moving. And also, this is not understood. How does this? Haloi eitzel Esav lo yoyeh choshev kol kach inyan kiyum hamitzvos. I like the kol kach. The Esav was not that important to him. Not that important. He says not. It didn't say lo choshev. Inyan kiyum hamitzvos, the performance of mitzvos. Val ma mediyah shel shamar tayag mitzvos. So why is he letting him know that he did tayag mitzvos? Like as if it's going to impress him. Like what is the point? Okay, so as we'll see. This is, I think, one of the only places in Ayin Beis where actually the whole Parsha story is actually part of the Maimorim, not just the beginning and end. Because the whole story of Evan Sapir is taking place here. Evan, yeah. I want to give another example, just to make it palatable, because I think it's critical not to keep this abstract. I said before, I asked the question, if someone asks you who you are and what you do are usually not aligned. That's why for Chassid, one of the biggest things was, he knows the shlichus the Rebbe gives him. That means that Rebbe knows from above that this is why you came down. When the Mordechai, the Tzaddik Nister, was told by the Baal Shem Tov, and Hashama kum tarap lamata, 60, 70, 80 yar, to Tana Teva Eden, what was he telling him? That you can live your 70, 80 years and do all the good to Zachen, but that's not why it came down. It came down for do a favor. The Rebbe says in the Sikha, unbelievable, he says that means he's telling him that not the mitzvahs you did, not the Torah you learned, not all the Aveda, it was just to do a favor for a certain person. Once you're down here, obviously you have to be Mekayim Tayag mitzvahs, but that's not why your neshama came down. In other words, all his mitzvahs was not the purpose, which is a pretty radical statement. Okay. In other words, so the biggest chus, or biggest blessing, is because when we come out of our mother's womb, we don't come out with a little box that says your mission in life is so and so. That would be nice. Right? It doesn't happen that way. You come into this world, we forget the whole Torah that we were taught, and the Aveda journey. So when you're blessed and someone tells you this is your purpose, why you're here, that's an unbelievable gift. Why? Because it's not revealed to us in this world. I want to give another example, however, where Kalim and Eris are not aligned. And you really can appreciate the story of Lovan and Yaakov. Yaakov is obviously a teferes of atzilus. He's essentially the world, more than that, in Eitz Chaim, the words with the saying, he is Baal HaTikun, they call him. Baal of atzilus. Yaakov is atzilus. He epitomizes, because obviously he brought Avram Yitzchak with him, and he epitomizes what it means to be aligned. But another example is, let's use an example because it's also very relevant to our discussion here. The example he uses here about speech and about thought and about expressing ourselves. When someone asks you to speak about the weather or sports or anything superficial, you can talk about it forever. I mean, you see, open up a radio, talk radio, and all day, what do they talk about? It may be interesting. Sometimes I listen to be very honest. But if you think it's almost a joke, push it like us. I'm not even talking, don't think that analyzing a game. Then they analyze out of the season the trades. I mean, it's like ridiculous. And there are people who even follow, there's college football. If you're just not football, you have to know college football. So I asked somebody, why is college football so important? He says, you can't appreciate professional football if you don't appreciate college football. If you don't appreciate college football, you need to know high school football, because that's where they all begin. So anyway, my point is, there's a lot, there's plenty to, there's enough chairs? If not, okay, good. Miret and bolbet and bolbet a ganzen Tag. Then someone asks you, you know what? Tell me something about yourself. And most people have very little to say. Tell me, about your intimate self, your deeper, your innermost feelings. Why is it that when it comes to superficial things we can talk, and when it comes to personal things it's not so easy to talk? And even if someone you trust, you could say, okay, personal things, I have my guard up, I'm not ready to share everything. But even with someone you trust, it's not so easy to communicate the deepest, most things. The reason is obviously because you yourself don't even know your deep innermost feelings necessarily. But even if you do know, what's the reason? It seems like a paradox. The things that are closest to you should be able to talk about so much. The things that are superficial should have very little words. The answer is because words are containers. Aces are containers, and levushim, as I'll explain in a minute. And containers, here's a container. How much water can you put into a container? Depends on the size of the container. Words are very limited. So words are perfect for superficial things. You want the intensity of a feeling? I don't have words. That's why we create a language called metaphor. What he said here, aces, like achida, or kameis, or he called, what are metaphors? Metaphors are mashalim. Poetry is metaphor. I don't know if you ever read poetry. When I was a kid, when we were in school, I read poetry, and I would always ask my teacher, I said, why can't the guy just say what he means? Why does he have to say it so cryptically? And the truth is, till this day, I'm not really sure. I think it just sounds, But then, obviously, the reason is because it captures a certain feeling that you can't capture in regular language. Think of a niggin. Why a song expresses something that words doesn't express? Because words are just inadequate. So when the Alter Rebbe in Shklov got up and said, Tamaru, kitei vavai, what he realized that as many words as he'll say, no matter how brilliant he is, you'll just reach a certain part. A niggin, what's a niggin? A niggin expands the containers. So the containers are no longer so limited. So conventional language just cannot contain such intensity. Now the interesting thing is, the deeper you go inside yourself, the less containers there are. A song. Okay? Then there are things that are so deep that even a song won't express it. You have, Kabbalah says, Kol Adalei Yishtam. Or let's go before that. You say, an oivei, a real oivei from the depths of grandmother's kishkes. A krechts, right. Or gewalt, or a laugh, or a cry, can express more volumes than all the words in the world. Why? Because the intensity of the eir is so much that the kelim, there's no kelim for it. The only keli is just an expression, say, oivei, or oi. That type of thing. Today we know, and also Chassidus brings kol delei shtama. There's a level where even a sound is too much. Psychologically, when a person goes through, God forbid, a big trauma, so they call post-traumatic syndrome. Right after trauma, The shock is so deep they can't even cry. You see, every time there's these disasters and tragedies, they bring all the psychologists. The first thing is you realize people can't even cry. Then there's a stage where you start crying. Actually, as a matter of fact, Shiva, no one should ever know, is brilliantly built. I once had a long talk with a psychologist how the Shleish Lebchi and the Shiva Lehesped, these are all brilliant in the human need, how we work out our pain. Because the initial step of pain is there's no expression at all. It's too intense. You can't even cry. Then there's a stage of crying. Then there's a stage of speaking. Same thing in positive things. You have a simcha. You dance. You dance bligvul. When a person is really total simcha, completely free, abandoned. No cheshbeinos. Not even those cheshbeinos you make, I'm going to drink this much and not that much. That type of cheshbon. No cheshbeinos. It's an expression that there are no kelim for it. So it just expresses itself. So what you find here is an ultimate paradox. The ultimate paradox is this. The more expression, the less teichen, basically. The more words, the less eir. The more eir, the less words. So sometimes you hear somebody just say one word, it can carry more weight than another person who's bulbed for hours and hours. What's the point I want to make here? I just want to show how there's a dichotomy, such a big distance between eiris and kelim. The kavanah, of course, is that God says, I want to create a world of tachtenim where kelim dominate, where they talk all day about shtusim, and I want you to bring the deepest eiris there, all the way to atzmus itself. That's the chiddush. To take a world that is so consumed with quantity, and turn it into a world of quality. Like they say, the people, what do they say? That today people read more and more about less and less. Or they talk more and more about less and less. Or they know people who know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Same idea. I'm ready. I roll with quotes. Another quote that's similar. The guy says, today, it's not that we have a higher rate of literacy. You know what literacy is? Illiteracy is that like 500 years ago people couldn't read. Today people could read. So he says not that today there's more literacy. Today illiterate people know how to read. That's the statement. So just because you know how to read doesn't mean you're literate. It just means you know how to read. They taught you in school how to read. Anyway, the point I'm making here is that the kavanah is not. So some mystics say, you know what? This world is not a world that's a container for elikus, for spirituality. You have to escape this world. For example, you go to Far Eastern mysticism, most of it is to go away from this world. You have to realize that expression cannot ever express the divine, the spirit. In a way, Havdil, the Rambam is shita, is what the ultimate schar is neshamas without gufin. Eiris without kelim. Because a keli ultimately is too limited. So yes, a keli will be rewarded, so there'll be tchis hamesim, but that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is elam haba neshamas nenem mizuv eschina, spiritual. And if you think logically, it makes sense. Except one thing: God is not more spiritual than He is material. That's the thing. Since He's beyond both and He wants both, and Deir b'tachtenim is a kavanas ha'atzmos, which means that since it's a place beyond Eir and Keli, if God was Eir, that would be a problem. Keli, how could a Keli become Eir? But since God is not Eir nor Keli, that's why ultimately the Kelim can combine with Eir. It means you could express the inexpressible. That's what it comes down to.
So he missed the plot.
Huh?
So he missed the plot.
Who missed?
Rambam.
He was wrong. Well, not wrong. He's right in a certain level, but the psak is like the Ramban, that Chis HaMesim is the ultimate reward. It says clear. This says this. No, it's like Shamein Hill. The halach is not like him. His point is correct on a neshama level. But look, Yofa Sha'achas B'tshuva Maisim Tevim B'kol Chaylam Haba.
Today.
Today and also, yeah, for sure.
The Rambam may have been right today, saying the way the world is run right.
The way Chassidus says the Rambam has an opinion, but the psak is not like the Rambam. It's like the Ramban. That's the way it's said. The Rambam is speaking from the level of the spirit. From the level of spirit, yes, Elam Haba has its milas, but it's not the ultimate reward.
How did they make that decision?
The Arizal is the final say in these matters.
And what does he base it on?
I trust him.
What do you see now?
Why do you base it? I mean, he's the Arizal. Well, let me ask you something. How do we know the Baal Shem Tov or the Rebbe is God speaks through him? What do you base that on? Your faith, huh?
He wouldn't lie.
Oh, he wouldn't lie. Okay, so Arizal goes in that category.
Yeah, but
Right. I don't know if that not lying is exactly the criteria. But let me ask you a question. When it says Vayiminu ba, let's go to the source. Vayiminu ba Hashem b'Moshe avdei. How they know? They believed in God and Moshe. Why they believe in Moshe? He's just a human being. Maybe he's fallible. Whatever your answer is for Moshe, you could apply to Arizal, the Rabbis, and everybody. It's the same thing. It means that God, just as there's a God that created the world and gave us a Torah, God also sent us in each generation. He sent us in each generation a messenger. Now, how do you know he's a messenger? So Torah gives you criteria.
So it's Alpin Nevuah, not a halachic decision. That's what I want.
No, it's a halachic decision. I never said Nevuah. 1 second. No. And how do you know Shammai and Hillel, the halacha is like Hillel? There's a Torah process for these things. It's not same thing. The words of Chassidus is that the Pesach Achron, the final say in matters of these type of matters, is the Arizal. And of course, then those that follow him, and he paskins like that. That's the way it says.
Why is that a halacha?
What?
Why is that halacha? It's not something you do.
He used the word halacha. I didn't use the word halacha. You want to use halacha? It means that is it means that's the final. It means that's the case. That's what's going to be. The question is in the future: will Chis HaMesim be the end process, or will Gan Eden be the end? The answer is that it will be. That's why because that's what it's going to be. That's the Metzias that's going to be. If it was according to the Rambam, then Chis HaMesim would only be for a certain stage, and then would come the next stage. I mean, you could ask the same question about every halachic decision in Mishnah and in Gemara and in Beis Din in every generation. It's the same question. Why is this different? There are two opinions, and then someone makes a decision. How do they make that decision? How do they come to these decisions?
It's different because it's going to happen yet. It's going to be a Metzias that's going to happen.
It doesn't matter. When they say halacha doesn't mean it happened. Halacha is what you do in that situation.
But we didn't do it yet. That's what I'm saying.
What I'm saying. And halacha is thousands of halachas that Shammai and Hillel are just theoretical. That didn't happen yet. Why are you saying? What's the difference? It's the same thing. The halacha has nothing to do with what happened, it didn't happen. Halacha is what is the ruling of what you do.
It's different than
I'm not saying you're wrong. It's not correct.
What?
It's not correct what you're saying. You could have an argument there's halacha and it may not be even relevant today. It may be relevant 100 years from now. Why is that? Why are you saying what you're saying? Huh?
I'm not saying it's different. I'm saying in our perception it's different because we don't practice like Chacham we light. Every day one more. We light from left to right.
There's halachas that have nothing to do with actions.
I'm not arguing with that. I'm just saying.
Anyway, this.
Why is it significant they made that statement? That the Alter made that statement.
Because we have two opinions, it's important to establish which one is correct. And I just gave a long discussion here. We're getting off so sidetracked here. I gave a long discussion that there's far-reaching implications. The Ramban. It means that tachtenim will ultimately be a dirah b'tachtenim. That's the ultimate point. Whereas according to the Rambam, it wouldn't be in tachtenim, it would be in elyanim. It's a major difference. So bottom line is, anyway, to go back, is that there's a whole process here that I'm just trying to show how Kelim and Eretz are so distant, and how the story of Laban and Yaakov is really Yaakov's story is bringing the Kelim into the picture, and Kelim and so that's why I said Eisius. So what are Eisius? When a person speaks, what you speak about, is it revealing your Eretz and Neshama, or is it concealing? So that's what the whole discussion here is. It concealing and revealing. The ultimate goal is that you should be able to reveal, even in the lowest levels, where everything is concealed, the deepest Eretz. That's Even Sapir. That's when a keli becomes a transparent channel for the Eir. That would be where a person's body is completely aligned with their soul. Obviously, we're not on that level. Yaakov was on that level. And lovan, either the higher lovan, the kedusha, helps achieve that, or the lower level is the lower lovan of kelipah is concealing it. So now he says like this. This was the story with Esav. Well, the Hoven Zet, to understand the story with Esav, why Yaakov told him about the mitzvahs. Yesh lahagdim mashnas ba'aleel. We have to preface what we learned earlier. The inyan vayikach Yaakov Evan vayerimo matzeva. What we discussed earlier, that Yaakov took a stone and he made from it vayerimo matzeva. He lifted it and made from it a marker. This happens twice in this week's parsha. Once after he wakes up from the dream, he takes the stone, and secondly when he makes it with the matzeva. The Yaakov also matzeva. For some reason, the Rebbe Rashab is just combining both as if it happened together. It's interesting to look it up. Why? The Yaakov also matzeva dafka, v'loy gal. Yaakov made a matzeva, not a gal. He made a marker, not a mound. The lovan also gal, and lovan made a gal, a mound. And his boy in gal the lovan b'chinas neged the biyah. And it can explain. This is the lower explanation that the gal of lovan, this mound that lovan made, b'chinas neged the biyah. You said nega means translucent, yeah. Nega is basically the clip of the nega that covers up in biyah. That's lovan. Who klipa kosha? It's a hard clip. It's a hard husk. It's a difficult clip. She'ena reitzeli is batla lakus. That's the gal. He's saying basically to lakus, to kedusha, you stay there. Don't come here, and I won't come to you. That's what he said. Because the klipa doesn't want kedusha there. You stay there. I don't want to have bittul. Doesn't want to have batl delakus. And that's why he made a gal. He made a mound, basically a boundary. You stay where you are. Don't come to me. Between him and kedusha, that there shouldn't radiate within him the divine energy to cause bittul. Okay. We have examples for this in our lives, I'm sure, plenty of them. You stay in your territory, don't come into mine. An explanation of this is, by the way, is based, as I said, on many Maimorim, but primarily this is actually the language. Some of this is from a Maimon that the Mittler Rebbe said at his grandson's wedding. Grandson is the oldest son of the Tzemach Tzedek, Yehuda Leib. So this is from that year. I believe it's Tavkuf Pei, Hey maybe.
Could I ask a quick question? Who initiated them to make the boundaries? Yaakov or Laban?
Laban pursued Yaakov. He said, "Why'd you run away from me? I love my children. I want to kiss them, and all that." And basically that, and then Hashem comes to Laban and says, "Don't hurt him." So Laban says, "I could have hurt you, but I'm not." And basically go into this whole discussion, who the sheep they belong to. They belong to me, blah blah. Yeah, and it's all mine. And then they make a covenant. They come to basically a peace treaty. And the peace treaty. So when they make the peace treaty, so Yaakov takes the matzeva, takes a stone and makes a matzeva, a marker. And then he says, the pasuk goes, "V'yemi Yaakov le'achav lok tu avonim." You gather stones. He told Lavan's people, "You gather stones." And they made a gal, they made a mound. And that's when Lavan said, this will be the marker, basically the boundary between Israel and Haran, and outside of Israel. And Lavan said, I won't come to you for bad things, and you don't come to me.
The difference between kelipah and kedusha, how did Yaakov agree?
Doesn't matter whether you agree to it. Since when does kedusha have to agree for kelipah to do what it has to do? Lavan did what he did, that's it.
The first mound, then he made another one. That was the first gal, right?
No,
There's no two gals.
No?
He's saying if the kavanah is to
I'm not
permeate,
saying-
the kedusha should permeate
Oh,
the
it's
kelipah.
You're talking about according to the interpretation, lovan of kedusha, lovan of kelipah.
No, I'm not kelipah. I'm not saying that.
So lovan of kelipah, that's it. Lovan went.
A treaty period. I'm not saying the difference between a gal and a
Avram
tzedek.
also said the Avram agreed to a treaty.
Oh, it's one gal, but
It's not about agreeing. Who says he agreed? This is what Lavan insisted on. Lavan built a gal, meaning kelipah basically, it's like your Yetzer Hara. It tells you your Nefesh L'Kis doesn't have to agree with your Nefesh Habamas. Your Nefesh Habamas is telling you Nefesh L'Kis all kinds of things. It's not, Yaakov maintained his position, and Yaakov compares even that gal. That's the whole point. But he did make it. You're talking about Lavan's intentions here.
I have just an idea of this. When you make a pile of rocks and then its light is able to shine through, it's almost like you want the light to shine through it. On the other hand, if you put one rock, there's no possibility of light shining through, so it's almost like the rock has to be buckled in order for light to shine through. On the other hand, the gal...
Well, he didn't come yet. He's going to explain the difference between matzeva and gal. Because clearly matzeva is far higher than... Because Yaakov made a matzeva, it's only one stone. One stone means less concealment, for sure. More stones is more concealment. Because one stone, how much can it conceal? It's only...
It means more concealment.
No, here's the other way around.
Right,
Here's the other... No, it's not a huge stone necessarily. This is like one stone of many. Basically, Lavan is more kelim and Yaakov is one kelim. That's really what he says. If you learned, the end of the Maimon says that Evan is in Kuda, it's Malchus. It's one Kuda. And then he made a matzeva from it, which means he made a marker. Evan is a sign of bittul, not of yeshus. One Evan. In this case. And in Laban made many avonim. And basically, in the example, it would be somebody who's confusing everybody with a lot of words. The guys that talk a lot. You ever see thieves, for example, can't afford silence, so they're always talking. We meet them; they're not comfortable in silence, so they talk and talk and talk. People who talk and talk and talk and they say nothing. Huh? Yeah, kiyetza b'zeh. She says, the explanation of this is the Yadua Dazelu Mazeh Osalakim. It's known that Zelu Mazeh Osalakim. There's a rule in existence that the Alter Rebbe brings right in the beginning of Tanya too. Zelu Mazeh Osalakim, which means God created a parallel worlds. That this is Zelu Mazeh. So everything in Kedusha, everything in holiness exists in the opposite. We learned this a little earlier when we said that lovan of kelipah is Menag Avi. He wanted to destroy. He is chochma of kelipah, standing against chochma of kedusha. She says like this: the kamoish yeshes is the kedusha bechinas keser chochma bina midas atzilus ubriya. Just like there are 10 spheres in kedusha, keser chochma bina midas and atzilus and briya in every world. Shakol bechinas tachlis kedusha. That it is all ultimate tachlis, pure, utter holiness, and utter tachlis ha'achdus be'ein and safe, and utterly united with the divine. Again, let's go back what that means. That means that think of it in our world would be like a tzaddik whose every part of his structured life is aligned with the purpose. The process of elimination means not like us, basically. So that's kedusha. Esos is kedusha. Because atzilus iyu, he is one. This is according to the Taich of the Alter Rebbe, not that Rizal. That he's one with his energies, one with his containers. That also the kelim is the structure, the words. They're also aligned with the divine purpose. Because the containers of atzilus are mamish alakus, and they're united in utter unity. Yet, so why are these called containers and these called energies? If it's all divine, it's all divine. There's a difference. That's why it says iyu v'chayu echad, iyu v'gamu echad. Why doesn't it say iyu v'chayu v'gamu echad? Would be a shorter language, because it's two different types of chads. Because the unity of the energy is different than the unity of the containers. And he's going to explain the differences. V'hefreshu al derech hefresh ben yachid le'echad. It's like the difference between yachid and echad. This we also learned earlier, right? I think in chapter Kuvav. Okay, so what's the difference between echad and yachid? The yachid ubchinas yichud atzmi. When you say yachid, it's a yichud atzmi, means it's a core unity. Shekula chad mamish. When you say yachid, you're not talking about details. It's like saying oneness. Oneness. It's not saying there's a bunch of details that are united. It's a state of oneness. It's l'mayla mepratim. It's higher than all details. Ve'echad ubchinas yisachdus hapratim. And echad already referring to sakhdus hapratim. Echad means there are many details and they're all aligned toward one purpose. They're all connected. So, for example, you can't say about a body. You can't say yachid. A body is made up of parts. You could say it's achdus is here in a body. You have many parts and they're all one body. When you say yachid, you're not even talking. You can't talk about parts. Yachid, you're talking about a state of oneness where there's no details altogether. It would be the example in Eilam Haza would be maybe a seed, like when we were all conceived. The second the seed is conceived, it's a one cell. Everything is in it, but you can't call it echad. There's no details broken down yet. So achdus is when there's already pratim. Like the Alter Rebbe explains in Teireh, Vayera and L'kud Teireh Ba'al Echad. The yichud the echad u gam ken b'chinas achdus mamash. Now, the unity of echad is also total unity. It's not fragmented parts, because lower than echad would be we have a bunch of parts and they don't work together. So that's a third level. So yachid is oneness, echad is a harmony within diversity, and then there's diversity to the point of even divisiveness. So you really could have 4 levels actually. You could have yachid, echad, then you could have a bunch of parts but they don't work together, but they don't fight each other. And then you could have machlekes, milchama. Just to show you that how it develops here. So the yichud gam ken b'chinas achdus mamash. So k'may ken hu hayichud the eres b'chinas yachid. So okay, so fine. So there's the 2 levels. Now he's applying it to eres and kelim. The same thing as yichud of eres is yachid. In eir, the unity is without details. And in containers, the unity is in a form of echad. You have a structure, and the structure works together. Now, in this interesting way, echad is deeper than yachid, because to say that we have 75 trillion cells in our body, and we have so many limbs and organs, and they all work in a healthy human being toward one direction is far bigger chiddush than to say there's only one organ. To take only one thing, there's nothing to oppose it. But you take many things and you create echad. So echad is maybe deeper, but the achdus per se of eres is a far higher quality achdus, because it's not even beyond. There's no details altogether. So we're not talking about the kavanah now. We're talking the level of achdus. So eir is yachid, and kelim is echad. But overall, you're talking about achdus here. We're not talking about pirud. We're not talking about a bunch of items that don't communicate. So the question is, it's a bittul, a higher bittul. They don't even recognize their details. And in echad, there's details that are united, which is the kelim of atzilus. So we talk about the others, that they were hen and merkava. You don't say they didn't have arms and legs. They had arms and legs, and Avram is chesed, and Yitzchak is gvura, and they had many different activities they were involved in. But they're all aligned toward the lakus. When you talk the word of yachid, really you'd be talking more of the higher areas like akudim or something. You don't even have details. Now obviously in atzilus, yachid and echad come together. This is similar to the Rebbe says in Sichos, the difference between vayakel and pekudei, right? Or vayakel pekudei, or vayakel is the kehila, the focus is on the klal. Pekudei, the focus is on the details. He even brings in halacha, like when you build a mishkan or other things, is each detail important, or is the total complete picture what's more important, the klal or the prat? And each one has its own value. Sometimes the klal is more important, but you need the whole picture. Sometimes the details are, and then it's both. They could be both as well. Yaakov Pekudei, the Rebbe also says in Yaakov Pekudei, and
Pekudei also gives the summary of every count.
Yeah. Remember, we talk misper. So misper is the details. Kelim, the misper, sefirot misper is primarily the containers. Sefirot sipur, it's like when someone tells a story. What do you hear? The details of the story, or you hear the total message? When you're reading a page. So when you get immersed, engrossed in a page, you forget even the letters. You just get so involved in the story, you don't even realize you're turning pages. That just shows you that the eir is so dominant, even though there are kelim there. But that's a perfect example. When a person writes an idea well, they communicate an idea well, they really bring eris and kelim together. No, I'm saying this because very often I give sometimes a course in writing, how do you write, or communicate for that matter. Same thing speaking. The key in all of it is eris and kelim. You can learn tremendous things because you have people who have great ideas. Their eris are great, but they don't have words, or their words are not aligned with their ideas. You ever sometimes express something and then you say, you know what, I didn't express it right. What happened? You got it in your head, but you said it in the wrong order. There are people that I could see sometimes a person speaks, they have great ideas, but they're saying B before A. So they tell you the end of that, like someone who tells you the punchline of a joke before they tell you the joke. It's a little, right? Or they laugh before the punchline, etc. My point is that it's all about alignment. Then there are people who are great kelim. They have great language, but they have no eris, or very little eris. So it's all about, right, exactly. It's about, and a perfect communication in writing or in speaking is where the kelim are exactly aligned to an idea. And you'll know right away, when you hear someone speak, you'll hear. If it's very clear to you, you know the speaker has put eris into kelim. Like imagine trying to fit in a gallon of drink into a cup like this. It won't work. Or the opposite. Imagine a big cup that has a little water in it. It's all the alignment. That's why, as I said, when you read a proper page, good writing is invisible to you. Right? When you read something, you get so involved in it, you don't even realize. If you start realizing what the words are, it means the writer is probably not such a good writer. Or you're distracted. Because bad writing is exactly that. They're telling you something, but the words become too important, instead of the idea just flowing through it.
Getting lost in the details.
So what does that say about Chassidus Shemaim?
Chassidus Shemaim? First of all, the Rabbeim were not, their role was not being orators. The Rebbe spoke Fabrengen, he's hardly, you would call a classic a speaker. First of all, he spoke 4 or 5 hours. Now that we know people's attention span is something like 6 minutes. So right there, so the Rebbe is Divrei Elokim Chaim. You're talking about a Rebbe speaking Elokus. So I don't think his goal was hasbara. I mean, the joke in yeshiva was people who are big chassidim or Rabbi, we'd always ask them, who has a better koyach hasbara, the Rebbe or Rabbi? And they didn't know what to answer. A Rebbe is being mamshech Torah from Shemayim. So I don't think the goal of it is purely, completely lefi the kelim. But when the Rebbe applied himself, and you see there are times when the Rebbe explained, it's a whole different world. Maimorim Bechlal were more mamayla lamata. Sichos are more mamata lamayla. That was generally known that way. When the Rebbe Rashab said a sicha, the same idea in the Maimir, he brought it down far, far more personal. Like here, when you learn this, what I'm saying, I'm explaining it. It's clear to me this is what he's saying here, but if you read it on your own, it's a little above. I mean, look, Chassidus Chabad brings it into Seichel, but a lot of people read Chassidus Chabad, they say to me, Chassidus Chabad to them is like Kabbalah. A lot of people see it as Kabbalah, which is true, because it's also cryptic. At the end of the day, reading this, you need... Look, I'm explaining it not just for you, for myself as well. I read it. And even this thing, Echad and Yachid. You can just jump through it and say, okay, I memorized Echad and Yachid. Like I always say, we learn Chassidus like you learn Halacha, Shulchan Aruch. People learn like this. Someone told me, I have Lamates Malachis, Eshes Sfiris, and Drai Levushim, So now you know it. Yeah. Obviously something wrong if someone says that, right? As the sefirot, what else? 39 malachas, 10 sefirot. What did you tell me? 4 worlds. Yeah, 4 worlds, right. Okay. Because, as I said before, we live in a world of numbers. The truth is, all these are concepts. These are conceptual ideas. And if you don't think conceptually and abstractly, you won't get there. You can't fit this into your terms. Why was I saying all of this? Someone asked.
About if minor is good writing.
I think it's brilliant writing, to be honest, but only when you read, you know the code. If you read this is amazing stuff. But the Rebbe Rashab is relying that you already know what the word atzilus means and you know the echad yachid. Once you know that, then it's great. If you don't know what atzilus is, he's not telling you atzilus in every line. He just says it. But I think if let's put it this way: Ayin Beis is not for beginners. It's not like he starts with I don't think Chassidus Chabad Bechlal starts. Let's first tell you there's 4 elements and what's an elam and what's a tzimtzum. It just jumps right in. That's why really learning Chassidus without a mashpia, without a teacher, you're going to miss most of it. Because the basics are not there. And like I said always, I was in yeshiva, went to the same yeshiva as everybody. The first thing they didn't tell us was the most important thing, in my opinion. The first thing I would say to anyone, any bachur, any girl learning Chassidus for the first time, 12, 13, 14, whatever age, to help them understand L'maylam is man amakim. You learn about atzilus as if it's another world. So you start, what does a child think of? Okay, atzilus, where am I going to fit in atzilus? Between Mars and Jupiter. Or between Jupiter and Saturn. Then you heard of Tzimtzum Addition. Okay, when was Tzimtzum Addition? So Rabbi would ask us, what century was the Tzimtzum Addition? And someone said the 2nd century. Because we're Megushim. We begin, listen, little children, you can't talk about L'maylam is man amakim. But the first thing you have to learn is that Atzilus is right here, and B'riyah is right here, and Gan Eden is right here. What do I mean right here? And right now, it's all within, dimensions within. So someone said, what does that mean? One second, where is it? I don't see it. That right away is the first Yisod of Chassidus, that most of Chassidus is about things you don't see. Someone even would said that to us, it would have been freeing. I had to come to that on my own. And then when I asked the Mashpia, he said to me, yeah, that's correct. You don't see it. So I said, really, that's not a derech hagah. For someone who's starting to learn, that's the first thing you want to hear. So I think that to answer your question, there's no question that my view is, this is like art, like poetry. But you have to be able to read it, because it's reading on. It's not easy stuff. That's the only difference. And what do you think I was going to say? That my morim are not written right? I mean, you think I'm a greater schreiber? I trust that it's written quite with. Look, okay. So anyway, I wanted to give the example. Now, Vayishlach is the biyah. Now we're going to biyah. Now it's a whole other world. We're over here. What's the story with biyah? The lav iyu v'chayu v'gamu echad. Here, it's not that he and the energies and the containers are one. Like it says in Tikkun. So now we're not talking about achdus. Now we're talking already that they're not one. Nevertheless, they're subjugated. They're bottled. Okay? Because the energy of the soul of biyah is complete alakus. Va'eris nefesh ruach. See, nefesh ruach neshama. So let me just explain before we continue here. As you know, there's 5 dimensions in every soul. Nefesh ruach neshama chai yechid. So here's an example. Right now, he says that he assumes that we can understand what he means. But you have to explain it, then you understand. So, when you talk about how atzilus...
Most people wouldn't even know the shevirat.
I know, I see you smile every time I know there's tevis. Yeah.
Slicing right through it like a knife in butter.
So here goes. So neshama, so when you have like this, atzilus now is manifesting in biyah. Remember, all this is coming to explain, let's not forget where he started here. Right? So he started now that everything, Kedusha, Eris, and Kelim are aligned. Now, what are Kelim of Bria like? That's now the question. That's the next level, Kelim of Bria. And remember again, use examples. This is all about how something that is more revealed becomes concealed, and then becomes more of a yesh, more of a self. So the point is, in Bria, you can't call it chad, but it's still bittul. So here's how it works. Atzilus is Eris and Kelim. As we learn, Malchus is the channel through which Eris of Atzilus transmit into Biyah. The example given usually is like, think of it, Atzilus is the great teacher, and Biyah is the student. Bria, let's talk Bria, is the student. Now, for the teacher to give the student, he has to take all his ideas, basically all his chochma, bina, das, through Yesod. He channels it through Malchus, like the moon, the sun through the moon. So Malchus is already a makabel, but Malchus is still intense, as we learned before. Then comes a parsa, between Atzilus and Biyah, the parsa, the gal, which jumbles up the words. So it's like disorganized, but it's also now like words of writing, not words of engraved. And Bria is the recipient, the student, that's hearing a brilliant idea, but it's now on the level of the recipient. So you can't call it iyu v'chayuchad. In the teacher's mind, the idea, the concept, his words, his expression, his edus and kelim are all one. In the student now, they're not all one. There's already differences. The student is still a student, however. Remember, so he's bottle. But it's not that you could say that it's the same in the level of Atzilus. The unity is not there anymore. A student is not as unified. A student's mind is not as united to the idea as the teacher's mind is to the idea. That's obvious. So what happens here? So basically, there's neshama ruach, nefesh ruach. Nefesh ruach, neshama of Atzilus, of Biyah, is being influenced by Atzilus. So he says, neshama of Biyah is elikus mamish. Va'edus nefesh ruach. So Eid and neshama, and va'edus, but the lower levels, nefesh ruach, va'kelim, and the containers of Biyah, shehem b'chinas nivra. Now we're talking about a creature. What means a creature? It's no longer just a divine structure. Now it has its own personality. Nevertheless, they're containers to the aid of the neshama of Bria. You follow what I'm saying here? So it goes like this. The teacher in this example is Atzilus, Eris, and Kelim. The teacher here is godliness. Remember that. So Atzilus is a world of elikus. Bria is already a student. That's not elikus. You can't call it godliness. It's a creature of God. Now the question is, how close is the student to the teacher? So it works like this. The aid of the seichel, obviously, aid and neshama, comes into the student, so he's getting the idea from the teacher. But the student also has lower levels. He has a nefesh ruach, and he has kelim, his own kelim. So his kelim are not one with the teacher's kelim and eris, but he's nevertheless listening. He's a student of that teacher. That's what he's saying here. So it's a recipient. And elsewhere it explains that biyah is like the body that's a container for the soul, the mashaneda, v'negeshes hanashama beguf. That which we are aware and we feel, sense, the soul inside the body, is only that it's there, but we don't understand its personality. Every one of us knows there's a life force inside us. And when, God forbid, after Mei V'Esrim Shana, that life force leaves and you have a body without a soul, a corpse. But someone says to you, what is the soul like? Muhus means mahu. What is it like? I don't know much. You know what I mean? We can figure it out. We can learn about it. But on your own, all you know, minimum is you know there's a mitzias. So we see that Bria, if Bria is like a guf to the neshama, so then Bria is like a guf, is like the student. You know the idea that you know, but you don't know the whole personality of it. So Bria is one step away from atzilus in that sense. It's interesting he needs his guf here, because before he used guf for kelim of atzilus. Now he's using it on the lower level. Huh?
Microcosm.
Yeah. What do you use before that? It's kelim is the guf is connected. Is a revealer, not a concealer. Okay, because atzilus l'gaba higher is like that. So it's a guf. Kelim of atzilus are a guf, and levushim was okay. There's different opinions. They're different in three different ways. Yeah. So the point, yeah. So the kelim of atzilus are like a guf. According to this, then the kelim of atzilus are even higher than a guf. They're like the sham itself. Okay, it's all microcosm like that. Anyway, so this is an explanation. So he's showing us how something could be now outside of it's no longer, you can't call it elokus divine, but it's still something that is receptive to the divine. Like a guf receptive to the neshama and only knows the mitzias. And this is the difference between kelim of atzilus and kelim of biyah. The kelim of atzilus masigim muhusa. The containers of atzilus masigim comprehend the muhusa. They know not just that it exists, that there's an energy there. They understand and comprehend its personality.
Well, this is coming to explain the difference between Eris and Kelim and Atzilus Gufa. Let's say it's not real complicated. To explain us.
He wants to explain really Zelumazah. That's really where it began. You'll soon see. So he's going through the whole picture here. And they are in a state of total, utter sublimation. What did I say yesterday? Bittul. I said it's not subjugation. Okay. Sublimation. V'yichud, and total unity, an ultimate unity. In a state of bittul of yichud Allah. He's adding in the parentheses, yichud Allah means this higher level of unity where there's no other entity. Not yichud tato means there's a yesh, shu batel. Yesh, there's an existence that's batel, like biyah. Here's talking atzilus, so it's yichud Allah. Subsumed, that's the word I use. Bittul, subsumed. Okay. V'kelim de biyah masigim rak b'chinas hametzias levad. And the containers of biyah, they comprehend only the existence alone of Elokus, of Oir. Nevertheless, they're still in the state of subjugation or sublimation. Like the body, that because it's bittul, because it's subjugated to the soul, that's why it lives from the energy of the soul. Like it says elsewhere. Same things with the 10 spheres of biyah. Also the containers, like the body, are in a form of unity and bittul, but not Not like an atzilus, where the muhus, it's a step away. It's like the existence of it. And that's why in the containers of biyah, they don't have a mix of good and evil. God forbid, and like explained earlier, Commissioners Barleil Peda Kuvov, like we learned in the previous chapter.
One has a tarus. Nehush, not again.
I'm looking. Where is it? Let me see. Yeah, the end of there, he said.
Where
do you see?
5 months before the keser.
Yeah. Ashenken the kedusha, Ashenken the kelim, and gam basi and kedusha gemura. Yeah, perikuvav.
So whenever we say that Yitzhira has a...
Yeah. How does he
use the term yichud l'gav the kelim of biyah?
Like in the guf, to the body, to the soul. The body is connected to the soul. It's just not like, doesn't know the muhus of the soul. It's not the personality of the soul. Hari essence is the kedusha and betachlis hakdusha, betachlis hayichud. So we see from this that the 10 spheres of kedusha, he's going out to zelumazah, which means the 10 spheres of kedusha, not just in atzilus, also in biyah, they're ultimate kedusha and ultimate unity. Yeah. Now he goes to the second side. Remember the kamoi. The kamoi was on the first line of the chapter. Now he goes to kach. The kamoi says this, and this whole arichas was all this. Now he goes kach harini kach be'ulamazeh. Now so the same as in the other side. There's gamkein esesviras. There's also 10 spheres. Keser, chochma, bina, umidas v'hu arotzim v'atayna delumazeh. That's the desires and the pleasures of the material world. What does this mean? That you use your mind, you use your rotzen, your desire, keser, and your mind, and your midas, for what? For indulging in Gashmis, in Elam Hazah. I'm sorry, the Lumazah, not now. I didn't say Lumazah. I'm sorry. In Lumazah, on the other side, not Kedusha, not in holiness. I thought it said Elam Hazah. No, the Lumazah. Correcting. Because not yet even talking Gashmi. He's going to give now the example. What's sefirot in Lumazah? What does it mean?
Why is das never part of this?
Because ain't das and kelipah. That's why. It's a very good question. You'll see he's very, very precise when it comes to this. But derech klal, when it comes kelipah, you don't count das. It says that das does not have kelipah, does not have das.
We talk about kedusha. A lot of times we just skip it.
Here he's talking the lumazah so he says also the same. Generally speaking, we learned it earlier. The reason is whenever you speak pnimius ha'elamus, you count das. You usually speak chitzenius, you don't count das. You count keser, because ein das nimna keser nimna. You know the rule. Okay, the rule goes like this: there's only 10 spheres, never 11. However, so sometimes it says we count keser, sometimes we don't count keser. So when do you count them? So there's expression Eitz Chaim, Kesha Keser Nimna, when you count Keser, you don't count Das. You count Das, you don't count Keser. The question is which is which? So the answer is, when you count the Pnimis, then you count Das, because Das is a Pnimi. A Chitzeni doesn't have Das. And when you count the Pnimis, so you don't count Pnimis HaKeser, because Pnimis HaKeser, Atik is higher than Sfiris, than counting. When you count Chitzenius, you count Arich, because Arich is the beginning of the Sfiris. Sherish and Netzalim. That's the technical. There's a deeper reason. I mean, I'm just giving you the technicality. So Bechlal, it really comes down to what you're counting. Here, he's definitely speaking on the. Since he's speaking Umazah, he's counting Keser, not Das.
What's the Kesher to Midas if you're not getting Das?
Midas are still born from Chochma Bina.
Das is what gives it meaning.
In Kedusha. You're asking in kelipah how they're midas without das?
No, it wasn't. I was asking in Kedusha, actually.
When you talk Chetzenis, so you're talking, then the order is the Abba and Ima give birth to the midas. keser is a different role. I mean, it's not for now. This is a different discussion completely. It's not relevant to here. I could show you the sources. There's places that talk about this.
Is he mentioning keser here because keser themselves, right?
Maybe. It's possible. Yeah. But that's when you usually also count Yud Aleph, some money. He's not counting 11, he's still counting sefirot. Okay. So what is it in kelipah? In like they're smart to do evil. These are like conspirers. They conspire. They use their wisdom. That means that the expression is used. I mean, the expression is always used that they're like I don't know if it's used by Parei Mitzrayim, but it's talking about people who conspire with their wisdom for bad things. So they're using chochma to do evil. So there's chochma. We're not saying they're not chochma, but it's pirud b'tachlis. It's utter separate. It's a mamash, the antithesis to what we learned till now. The Melikus.
He said that the Romans built everything for their own good.
That's where he says it? I think it's a pasuk.
Yeah, but that's what he mentioned. He said that whatever.
When Avodah Zarah, where he says that everything they build is for their own glory. Maybe. These are the exact antithesis of what we learned before about atzilus and the sefirot. Or biyah, also biyah, not just atzilus. They're utter separate from godliness. Yeshus, in a state of yeshus, self, the gasus and grobkeit, crassness, ke'inyin chumris elam haza, like the coarseness of this material world, chochmas chitzenius, and of the outer wisdoms that are all about yourself. Shein hepech halakus legamri. They're antithetical, completely diametrically opposites of godliness. Well, so how they come to be? Only the tzimtzum ha'er b'meisri hashefa, from the tzimtzum ha'er, from the diminishment of the energy, b'meisri hashefa, and like the leftovers, the shiraim, the leftovers, the meisris. Leftovers of the transmission, the essence, the gedusha, the excess from the pieces that fall off, like so to speak. Like an animal comes and eats from the crumbs, the remainders that come from the shefa, from the outer dimension of the containers. The essence spheres, the gedusha, from the 10 spheres of gedusha, nimshach lam k'tzasi nika. They receive some type of energy. It's like parasites. When parasites come and they feed off, there's a lot of energy. They come and they just take the scraps. Like which animals? The scavengers. That's the word. Scavengers. And they just come, the leftovers that are left over, they get a little energy and that's where they live off. Like he says in Tanya, why can't they live off the energy itself? Because then they wouldn't be kelipah. If they were living directly off of it, they would not be menagdim. They would be bottle. Because there's no such thing as getting energy. He says like kedusha, in Tanya Perek Vav, he says everything that is kedusha means it's bottle. That's why he gets a lot of positive energy. You see this all the time. You see, whenever you see parasites, bacteria, they come when there's no protection. When there's a lot of either a sterile environment, let's say, when there's a lot of and positive energy, there's no room for them to come into it. An infection always comes where there's weakness. So it'll always come where there's no defenses up. Vulnerability, exactly. Right. In the parentheses, yeah. Now they don't get it straight from the containers. God forbid. They get it from the hair that's on the outside of the skin. The malchus. That means the leftovers of the transmission. Let's speak begashmis. Bacteria gather a lot on the hair of a person. It's one of the reasons we have hair, actually, is to protect from infection. So the hair and the skin are outer layers that protect from most infections. That's why, God forbid, when someone has an open wound, you have to clean it, because there's no protection. Or God forbid, when there's surgery, so the open organs, the vital organs are exposed, that room has to be very sterile, because that's where most bacteria will go, because that's where the real energy is. So Tuma B'chlal means negative energy that always gathers with this positive. Negative energy never gathers. That's why I always have. So now I'm just using this as an example. So that's why in Torah, we spoke about this a few classes back. You'll find, whenever you find Kedusha, you find Tumah. The more Kedusha, the more Tumah there is. Where's the most Tumah possible of all? In Kodesh Kodashim. That's why even one flaw, think of it like a Ravav al Beged Talmid Chacham. Because the Talmid Chacham is such a high level, even a piece of dust on him is already it's what Jigan said, the Jewish theory of relativity. You know what it is? One hair on your head, 3 hairs on your head isn't much, but 3 hairs in the soup, you know? So when you have one hair on your eye, like a piece of dust on your eye, it's very irritating. The same piece of dust on your finger is meaningless, because it's all relative. Wherever there's more power, so to speak, more sensitivity, every little thing counts. That's why, where's the most tumah? The biggest halacha is hilchos tumah, is hilchos nida. Why, of all things? Because that's where life is. What is nida? Nida is a child that could have been born. It's life. It's an egg that wasn't fertilized. So the greatest energy always brings the greatest negative. Not because it's bad, on the contrary, because it's so holy. The holier the thing, kol shegadol mechavere, kol mi shegadol mechavere yitzre gadol memeno. The bigger the person, the greater the yetzer hara. Is that true? Sure. Okay. You have to ask big people. Is that what you're saying? Huh?
I'm definitely a great man.
Yes. Not everybody's a great yetzer hara is a great man. It doesn't say kol misha yashli gadol yetzer hara yish gadol. It says kol mikol gadol yitzre gadol memeno. The point I'm making here is that a lot of Kedusha and Tara brings always the negative side. So that's what he's saying here. So they could not get their energy from a reveal. They have to get it from the Eir. Eir on the other side of the skin of Malchus. Because he said before that Malchus, remember the sandal, the shoe. There's a malach called sandal actually, shoe. Like sandal. And there's a malach called chashmal. These are the levushim. That's where the kelipahs get their power from, not directly from the energy, from the kelim themselves. Lovan the kelipah. Now he goes back to lovan the kelipah. So now we understand zelu mazeh. So what do we have? We have 2 parallel tracks: atzilus and biyah, sefirot, pure kedusha. Even the kelim, just different levels. This is total yichud. This is yachid, echad, etc., etc. But then you have another track that is the opposite, pirut. It's not connected. It has its own agenda. And that's lovan the kelipah. That's the level of lovan the kelipah.
If kelipah is getting from Yemika from the Kedusha, how's it Zelu Mazet, much less energy? This is getting straight from the source, and this is getting from them. So it's
a very good question. But God gives it a lot of, like, for example, it says that when we're born, both the animal soul and the divine soul were born with both nefesh elokis, nefesh habamis. But it says agdem et tainise, right? That the yetzer hara comes with a taina. It's not an equal battle. How could I fight? So the Eibishter says, I'll give the yetzer tev will really begin to manifest in a child at bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah. So it's true. All kelipah gets its energy, but it's given a head start. It's given power. And trust me, we don't need Maiserav. You don't even argue. Let me ask you a question. What has more power in this world, kelipah or kedusha? Well, God gives. See, kelipah thrives. You have to understand. Now, kelipah thrives with its darkness. So when there's a concealment, When there's absence of light, kelipah thrives. So even though the chutzpah is that kelipah is getting its energy from kedusha, but when there's no revelation, kelipah can become far more powerful. That's the irony. That the kelipah that's getting, look what he says in Tanya, that tzaddikim neshamas klolim, they give chayis to everyone, even the rishayim of their generation from the tzeperim. So the people who are killing the place, you can end up killing the people who give you your chayis. That's how concealed it is. That's a tragedy, of course. So the people getting chayis from the tzaddikim are killing the place they got chayis from. Yeah, that's why it says that if the goyim knew, the non-Jews knew what the Beis Hamikdash was doing to protect them, they would have surrounded it instead of destroyed it. They surrounded it to protect it. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? Why, you don't mean chutzpah? Kelipah is chutzpah. They're getting energy, but they get energy. When look. The Eibishter made it in a way like this, that in this world, kelipahs dominate, even though they get their energy from kedusha, because all the kedusha, most of it is concealed. So the kelipah can deny that it's getting it. No, the kelipah is coming from the concealment. It gets more powerful. The more concealed, the more kelipah there is. In Torah Shalom, he actually says an expression that kelipahs are heder. The less energy they get, the more powerful they become. Look, I mentioned before, talk radio. What are the most powerful entities in the world today? The ones that have the least kedusha. Because that's how they thrive on darkness. There's some people very successful when everybody else is in the dark. You know what I mean? Like criminals. They're very successful when everybody else is...
That's their knowledge is power.
When everybody else is down. Deception. You never heard of this idea? Very powerful people, they thrive only because everybody else is fooled. And if everything was exposed, they wouldn't be able to succeed. That's how kelipah works. It thrives on concealment. All biggest crimes are done.
Ponzi schemes.
Huh?
Ponzi schemes.
Machteres.
The Ponzi schemes.
Yeah.
So basically, kedusha has more power. It's just that it's covered.
That little just is the difference between a Holocaust and no Holocaust. So it's not just a small just. That little just you just said is the difference between life and death. What do you think? Why do we cry when we say that when the Rishayim prevail, we say to God, look, they're saying Ayeh Lekech. It's the worst thing possible. Because they could say, where's your God? Where's your great God? That's the kelipah of this world. It's upside down. Right? You know the expression? A person won't have chutzpah to someone that he owes something to. So how does kelipah have power? Because they're not Adam. It's an Adam. You need to be a madrega to not have chutzpah. When you have not a chutzpah, if you're not Adam, you have the chutzpah. I understand what you're asking. You're asking how is it getting energy? But let me ask you a question. God gives power to us all the time. He's giving us life. And yet you can take your hand and hurt somebody. Tell me, how could you use a hand that God is giving you life to it, and you're using it against what God says? A ganef is far worse than a gazlan. Let's put it this way.
You don't feel that at the time.
Huh?
You don't feel that at the time.
That's because it's for market.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Kelipah doesn't feel. That's why it's the power. Why is this so surprising to you? What do you expect? What do you want? Tell me, what would you like it to be like? God wanted a world where kelipahs dominate, and wants you to be smart enough to and reveal the light and the. Look, you ever see when you ever go and turn over a stone in a garden and it's full of maggots and all kinds of things, and as soon as you turn it over and you shine light, what happens? They all run. That's the story of kelipahs. That's what the Rebbe says today. Open your eyes. He says the kelipahs are already gone. You got to open your eyes. You don't open your eyes, you don't shine the light, they will thrive. You don't mean psychological warfare. I remember a guy in camp when I was a kid. He came to camp and says the best chess player ever. Now, I played chess decently. I can't say I'm the best. So I sagged the guy out for 2 days. I convinced him that I'm like the biggest master that ever lived. We sit down to play, and every stupid move I made, but had no cheshbon, he thought was ganze Sache, and he ended up losing. Far better than me. It never happened again. But because I psyched them out, it's psychological warfare. You can convince somebody in negotiations, okay, you have everything in your hand. And they think, and they'll give everything away. Then they find out you bluffed. What is that? That's kelipah, and it's a perfect epitome kelipah. It rides and lives on bluff.
Got it.
Luft.
But doesn't it also
But with greater luft, it can do a lot of damage.
Doesn't it also have...
One fool can burn down a castle that 1,000 wise people built, as they say.
Doesn't it also have much more shefa b'poil mamash?
I don't know what you mean by the word b'poil mamash.
I'm saying not poil mamash. I'm saying it has more amounts than kedusha.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you mean by more amounts. And you're talking about
Moisture, whatever you call it, leftovers.
The leftovers. That's not more than what is leftovers.
if you let it, if you bluff well, it has it thrives in darkness. So if there's more concealment, it will thrive. Why don't you just apply it to your own life? Find out last time you bluffed, last time you lied. A lot of people live in lies. Lies is what their basis of their whole existence. This is the easy part to understand, the kelipah. We have to understand the other sides. For me, the challenge. The kelipah, this is how it works every day. You don't need that Rebbe Rashab to tell us that kelipah is false. You ever saw kelipah being real? Everything that comes from that side is built on falsity. Now, we happen to worship falsity in this world. What will people do for money, for example? When you're dependent on someone for money, someone has a lot of money, you're connected. And everyone is affected by it. What is that? Isn't that false? If a celebrity walked by right now, would somebody not look at the celebrity? It's a falsche Welt. Alma de Shikra. This is the perfect world for kelipahs. This is where it thrives big time. We're under the stone. There's no light here. You understand? To live in a dark world. That's a perfect place for... This is the level of love in the kelipah. That's beneath the parsa, beneath the curtain. Between atzilus and bria, and his bodily el pedikuv zayin, and it was discussed earlier in the previous chapter 107. The lovan ubchinas chochma de kelipah. That's lovan chochma de kelipah. The isa gamkein shebchinas keser de kelipah. Now you see why he's bringing keser. And it also says at in other places that he's keser of kelipah. Who take of kelipah b'yeser. What's keser? Keser means the crown of kelipah, meaning he's like the king of kelipah. So it's the intense kelipah, very intense, increasingly intense, powerful kelipah. Remember, kelipah is not a negative thing. It's a perfect example again. Kelipah means a husk, a shell, like the shell of a nut or a peel. That Shalah explains that in the beginning of the world was created kelipah shemer lepri. Why did God create kelipah? To protect the fruit, like the skin, protects the body. The shells and peels of fruit protected from worms and so on. So it protects. Why is it then called kelipah? But kelipah is when you forget there's a fruit inside and you start worshiping the peel. That's when it's called kelipah. But if you understand that it's a kelipah, if you understood that all your material world is just a means to b'chol d'rechecha de'eyu and chol masech l'shem shamayim, right? That's total alignment. We don't understand that, so the kelipah becomes a power. So it thrives in the fact that you don't know there's a fruit. It's like the famous story where the king's chauffeur or whatever, the king's eved, the king leaves town. And he begins to play king until the point he convinces himself he's the king. When the king comes back, he says, "Wait a minute, I'm the king." In other words, the whole thing is lived. He convinced himself he's a king because the king went away for a while. This is what happens in our world, where, yeah, the nimshul you could all apply wherever you want. The kamoi b'kedusha b'chinas lovan alien, just like the first interpretation of lovan in kedusha. There it was keser of kedusha. What's lovan alien? The pure whiteness, which is pure light. Before there's even colors and shape. That's pshitas atzmus, because lovan, as we'll learn later, is geven haposhut. Lovan, white, is not just another color. It's not like there's white, red, blue. Lovan is the natural color of everything, and the other colors are so-called additional. That's why you see in a prism, light is whitish. You put in a prism and then you bend light, that's when it gets color. So all colors come from white. The purest color, the essence of all colors is white. We'll learn later, Evan Sapir, this is connected to the transparency of the containers. So just like lovan alien, that's again also, Evan Sapir is also lovan alien. So Evan Sapir, it's all the same idea. So that's pshitas atzilus. What's pshitas? Pshitas means shapeless, substanceless, of atzilus, of the core veins of shalamayim b'chinas chochma. That's higher than chochma. Kamei came kelipah. The same thing, lovan of kelipah, is also keser. B'chinas take of a kelipah shalamayla mitam vadas. It's the intensity, the power of kelipah that's higher than tam vadas. Chutzpah b'lei taga, which means it's not based on reason, which has limits. When there's kelipah without reason, then it's completely like it's just a desire, like keser. It's also a pshitas. That's the desire and the pleasure of the other side. Of keser. Like someone who's deeply sunk in, deeply submerged, God forbid, in the taivas, in the pleasures, in the taivas, in the desires, and tainugim and pleasures, physical pleasures. Anyone relate to that? This line. I was once learning a maimon. The guy said the only thing I understood was Ashakur b'Yeshu Rachman Islam b'Taivas tainugim gashmi. All the rest I didn't get. Okay, that's also a nadreg.
Yes, that's somewhere.
And then there's also ktayvus that are takamakif from the kelipah like keser. Kamei Yaakov, like honor, like ego, vanity. Hakovid.
That's a little lower level of kelipah? A little better than ktayvus?
I'm not, maybe higher, I don't know. It's klippus. He's saying, Ukahai Gavin and similar, Kamashis Bar Basamach, as we shall explain soon. You can also say Kamashis Bar Basamach, as we shall be explained, because it's close to us. Because, yeah. Lovan the kelipah. This is the level of love in the kelipah. Shenofal b'derech shvira v'nefil b'chinas leven ayin dekdusha. That fell. B'derech shvira, not just it fell in a regular way. Something can fall in an organized way. But then you have shvira. When you break it, it just plots, right? It shatters. V'nefil b'chinas leven ayin dekdusha. It's similar to what he said about disorganized, but this is even worse than disorganized, because this is like, there at least you're giving a riddle, so the letters are jumbled and disorganized, but there's a word there. There's something there. When you shatter, means it's like you put something in containers, the container shatter, everything goes flying everywhere. So that's how the opposite. See, concealment never creates that type of a radical shift. So it all comes from Laban Elyon de Kedusha. So the higher lovan leads to the other lovan once there's enough concealment, and it falls. That's the shattering of the vessels of the containers of teyu. Shehu b'chinas sag shelamayl mishema. Teyu comes from a word that's higher than tikkun. The word of teyu was the name sag. That's ma. Just briefly, we've already discussed this. That the yud kei vav kei is Gematria 26, right? But there's a concept called miluyim. You know what miluyim are? Milui means that every Hebrew letter is further spelled out, like Yud. The milui of Yud is 20. Yud is 10, Vav Daled is another 10, 6 or 4. The milui of Hey, as we'll see, there's 3 ways to write Hey. Hey Aleph rather is 6. Hey is 10, and Hey Yud is 15. The milui of Vav can be Vav Vav, that's 12. There's Vav Aleph Vav, that's 13. And Vav Yud Vav, right? That's 22. And then the last Hey again, like the first Hey. So when we speak about the Shemus, so Yud Kei Vav Kei is the basic. Every Hashpah comes from a Yud, and it starts with a point, a Hey where it expands, Bin Chochma Bina. Then comes Vav, transmission. You transmit it to someone else. That's the Vav, like a line. And the final Hey is the recipient. Okay? So, for example, it says sometimes about tzedakah that way. You have like this. You have the Yud is the coin. The Hey is the hand of the giver. The Vav is when you stretch it out to someone. And the final Hey is the recipient of tzedakah. That's what it says. Baal Shem Tov says that. It says on a pasuk. That's why it says Nosan Titin. Pasuk Tiftach. Anyway, so everything is in the form of, but when you break it down further, Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's more than, it breaks into 4 different type of configurations. That's when you have Shem Ma, Shem Ban, Shem Sag, and Shem Ab. It's just gematris actually. 45, 52, Ma, Ban, Sag is 63, and Ab is 72. So it all depends on the milui. Is it b'milui alfin, or b'milui heyin, or b'milui yudin? That's the expression. Is it the milui of aleph, which would be vav, aleph, vav, or the milui of yud would be vav, yud, vav, or the milui of aleph, hey, would be hey, hey, not hey, aleph. And if you add it up, you'll see it come four different combinations. You want me to do it? Okay, 45. Huh?
But the Sag is also, Yaakov was 63 years old when he got the brachas.
Yeah, but this is not what he says. That's another story, but that's not what he's talking about here.
Well, I understand how is it 4 calculation, 3 calculation. Alf and Hay.
First one is
Different combinations. Ma is the simplest, right? The Ma is the minimum. So you have Yud is 20. Yud is always 20. So you could always rest this 20 from a Yud, because it's Yud Vav Dal. There's only one way to do a Yud. It's all about the Hay's Vav and the Hay. There's that, how that separates. You could figure it out. You go Hey Aleph, that's 6, 6, 12, right? 12 plus 20 is 32. Aleph. Shem Ma is Milui Alfin. The Hey as an Aleph and the Vav as an Aleph. That adds up to 45.
Okay. I'm not asking the amounts, but there's Ma, Ban, Sag, and Ab.
Yeah.
There's 4 different ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
They're different combinations. You just add it up. I'll show it you on paper.
hey, differently also.
Because one of them you don't count, I believe, you count without Aleph something. Yeah. Look, a Vav can't have a Hey. It's either Vav Yud Vav or Vav Aleph Vav or Vav Vav. That's where you have the difference. Hey could be Hey Aleph or Hey Hey. Try it out, you'll see. So anyway, the bottom line is, so when we use these names, we're basically talking about different levels. Ab is usually referred to Ak. Adam Kadmon is usually Shem Ab. Eson. We'll learn this later. Sag is usually the name of Toyu. Toyu and Tikkun. I'm sorry, Sag and Ban are usually Toyu. Ban is Gematria Behema, and Adam is Gematria Memhei. Tikkun is always Ma. So basically, Toyu is usually Sag, and usually it says Sag is the root of Ban. That's what it says. We learn this later in detail. So what he's saying here is that Toyu is higher than the world of Tikkun. That's where Laban Elyon originates from. But when it breaks and shatters, that she says, so in its root, it's Sag before the shattering. So it's Laban Elyon, it's a very high level. But when it shatters and falls,
How does the shatter fall?
well, remember, that's not in time, it's stages. Basically, I mean, the best example is when in our own lives, what makes somebody, let's say, have a fit of rage? What makes you plots? Makes you go crazy? You go ballistic, as they say. When something gets you very angry, something overwhelms you. So the same thing there. And Toyu, basically, it's a type of cosmic anger, if you wish. Because the Eidos are very intense and the Kelim are very small. There's a lot of frustration. And then comes a point where it plots. Now it's plotsing right now, as we speak. It's constantly happening. And there's a level before it happens, there's a level after it happens. So it's a constant process. I mean, I explained it elsewhere. Technically speaking, if reality is only godliness, and then God concealed His presence, you have yourself a major problem. Because there's a certain there's what we call a free radical going on. There's a falsity going on. God hid His presence. Now He did it for a good reason, because He wants us to emerge, that we should have an independent reality. But something's going to have to plot here. Something has to be a market correction, so to speak, a reality check. So the energies are expressing the divine. The containers are weak and not really there. So that's where it all comes together, and there's a shattering. And that's what creates the world in which we live, where there's such kelipah and power. The sparks are scattered. Think of it like this: God wrote a story, a beautiful story, and He wants us to play out the story. And then someone took the story, or God Himself did. He tore up the pages and scattered all the letters of the book, and they're all over the earth right now. And you don't know what's what. And then we send down neshamas like us to come and start collecting and putting back the pieces together. That's sefirot hakelim. So there's netzutzos everywhere, wherever you go. God leads you there because He wants you to gather the letters and put them together, that they become all scattered. You understand what I'm saying? This is every shlichus we go on. Every time we meet somebody, every opportunity is meant to connect the dots and tell the story. That's hashgacha pratis. But it's up to us to connect those dots and put it all together. Be ma'achadit. Meanwhile, it's in the domain of kelipah. That's lovan. So lovan is rooted in a very high place, but then when it shatters, it's in a place of band and nega. Lovan zed, the kelipah, osagal b'nei levein hakdusha. Yeah.
I'm having difficulty understanding what you said that it's happening now also, because you said that when he did the birur.
When the Rebbe said.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's happening now anymore.
Well, the shevirat, even if the birur is finished, as the Rebbe said, we still have to be aware of it. So in that sense, why?
I don't know if the letters are being splattered now still.
Okay, that I can't tell you. I didn't visit Tayo lately, but I would say yes, because even if they're not being splattered, even they're not being scattered, what do we say? Shattered. In a way that we have to necessarily elevate the sparks, but they're being shattered in a way that keeps our eyes closed. So we're still living in a world where the story is not being told.
There we go.
So it could be a shevirat hakelim. Shevirat hakelim per se is not a bad thing. Shevirat hakelim, the results. So let's say all the sparks were gathered, but now we still have to, like the story, all the pieces were gathered, but we're not reading the story. So they're not reading the story. There's still a concealment. You want to call it shevirat hakelim, maybe not, but there's definitely a helam.
Yeah, there's a helam for sure.
Okay, so I'm not going to argue with this point. I'm not that much of an expert. Let me see. Maybe we stop here. Let me just see where the next station here is. I have to know where the next gas station is. 1 second. Okay, we can stop right here. No, so we'll stop here. Band Nega, and then we're going to learn. We're going to continue with Gal. Before you go, let me just say. So we began page 208. Began Discourse 28, beginning the first half of chapter 108.